This is simply unacceptable behavior for this team. I expect immediate improvement, otherwise we will have to reconsider your position here.
Are you all right? What's wrong?
I can't find him. It's getting dark.
My son. Oh, my son!
People ask me why I remember that rainy Tuesday so clearly, and I tell them it's because that was the night I learned that the smallest kindness can rearrange an entire life. My name is Grace Adeyemi, and back then I was nothing more than a junior assistant at Whitmore Holdings, answering phones, filing reports, and trying not to be noticed by anyone above me. I never imagined that an old woman shivering at our front gate would end up changing the direction of my whole future. But that is exactly what happened. It was raining hard that evening, the kind of rain that soaks through your shoes in seconds, when I saw her huddled against the iron gate of our office building. She was thin, wrapped in a thin shawl that had long stopped keeping out the cold, and her eyes had that faraway look of someone who wasn't quite sure where she was. Our security guard was already shouting at her to move along. I couldn't just walk past. Something in me refused to let her sit there another minute in that storm, so I took off my blazer and wrapped it around her shoulders before anyone could stop me. Of course, someone saw. It always happens that way. Within minutes, I was called into my supervisor's office and scolded for embarrassing the company. Mrs. Whitfield, our department head, told me plainly that I was paid to file paperwork, not to play savior to strangers off the street. I apologized, went back to my desk, and tried to focus on my work, but I couldn't stop thinking about the old woman still sitting out there in the cold. When lunchtime came, I carried my tray straight to the gate and sat beside her on the wet pavement, sharing what little I had. She told me her name was Mama Iris, though even that seemed to cost her effort to remember. She spoke about a son named Daniel, someone she loved fiercely, and then her words would trail off, as if the memory itself kept slipping through her fingers like water. I didn't understand yet how deep her condition ran, but I understood enough to know she needed someone. And that day, I decided that someone would be me. Word spread through the office quickly. My coworkers whispered that I had lost my mind, feeding beggars on company property, wasting my lunch hour on a stranger who might not even remember my name the next morning. I ignored them. Every day for the next week, I brought Mama Iris food, sat with her, listened to fragments of stories that never quite connected. Mrs. Whitfield warned me twice more, each time more coldly than the last, but by then I had stopped caring what she thought of me. Then came the morning everything nearly fell apart. Mama Iris collapsed right in front of me, her body giving out from hunger and exhaustion after who knows how many nights sleeping rough. I screamed for help, cradled her head in my lap, begged her to stay with me while someone called for an ambulance. Mrs. Whitfield tried to order me back to my desk as if nothing were happening, telling me that if I left with that woman, I shouldn't bother coming back to my job at all. I looked her straight in the eye and told her that a human life mattered more than any job. And then I rode in the ambulance beside Mama Iris, holding her hand the entire way. At the hospital, the bill was more than I could afford on my salary, but I handed over what savings I had and promised the staff I would find the rest somehow. The doctor said she was severely malnourished and would need days of care to recover. I stayed by her bedside as often as I could, sneaking back after my shifts, even though I knew Mrs. Whitfield was watching my every move, waiting for an excuse. That excuse came fast. The day I returned to the office, exhausted and worried sick, I was called in and told I was suspended without pay, effective immediately, for what she called reckless and unprofessional conduct. I remember asking her one simple question. Would you have turned your own mother away in the rain? She had no answer for that, only anger. I walked out of that office with nothing but the clothes on my back and an unpaid hospital bill hanging over my head, and somehow, I still felt like I had done the right thing. Mama Iris recovered slowly. Her memory came back to her in pieces, like puzzle fragments scattered across years of confusion. One afternoon, she started humming a tune I didn't recognize, and she told me that someone, long ago, used to call her Queen Iris. Another day, she remembered her son loved climbing a mango tree in their old backyard. Each fragment brought her closer to remembering who she truly was, and closer to remembering the son she had lost somewhere along the way. It was around this time that an old friend of mine from university, Michael, heard about what had happened and reached out to help. He worked in a different department at a rival firm and had connections I didn't have. He visited often, brought supplies, and reassured me that I wasn't foolish for doing what I did. Little did any of us know that the very company where I used to work belonged to a man who had spent years quietly searching every shelter, every hospital, every street corner for a mother he had lost. That man was Daniel Whitmore, the CEO of Whitmore Holdings itself, though I had never once seen his face in the 2 years I worked there. He had just returned from an overseas business trip, and instead of heading to his office as his assistant expected, he asked to be driven straight to the city shelter where he had last heard word of a woman matching his mother's description. When he arrived, the staff told him she had already been discharged, taken in by a kind young woman nobody could quite name. He begged them to remember any detail at all, refusing to accept another dead end after years of searching. Meanwhile, inside a small keepsake box Mama Iris had kept hidden beneath her few belongings, we found an old photograph and an engraved address. Her hands trembled as she handed it to me, telling me it was time we found the truth together. I promised her I would take her there myself no matter what it cost me. We traveled across the city to that address, only to find the house long abandoned, its windows dark and its garden overgrown. A neighbor who still remembered the family told us they had moved years earlier, but she gave us one more clue. The family patriarch now ran one of the largest companies in the country, Whitmore Holdings. My stomach dropped when I heard that name. It was the very company that had discarded me only weeks before. Still, I couldn't let fear stop me now. Not when Mama Iris was so close to the truth. I called Michael immediately and asked him to help me arrange a meeting, however impossible that seemed for a suspended employee with no standing left in that building. To my relief, he agreed to help, understanding exactly how much this mattered. Back at Whitmore Holdings, there was someone determined to keep that meeting from ever happening. Sandra, an executive who had long resented my closeness to the company's reputation, and, it turned out, had her own secrets to hide, ordered security to keep me out entirely. When that failed, she went downstairs herself to handle what she called a disturbance. But Daniel came down in person instead, curious about the commotion, and that decision changed everything. I stood in that lobby and told him plainly who I was and why I had come. I explained that the woman waiting outside kept calling out for someone named Danny, and the moment those words left my mouth, I watched his entire face change. He told me that only one person on earth had ever called him that name, and it was his mother. When Mama Iris saw him step through those doors, she didn't need any more proof. She called his name and reached for him with both arms, and I watched a family that had been broken apart by cruelty and time finally come back together in the middle of a busy office lobby. In the days that followed, the truth about Sandra unraveled completely. It turned out she had been manipulating company finances for years, and she had pushed for my suspension specifically to keep me from asking too many questions about missing funds, while also punishing me for embarrassing her in front of the staff. When Daniel learned the full extent of what she had done, both to the company and to the woman who had saved his mother's life, he terminated her employment on the spot and reversed my suspension immediately. He didn't stop there. He promoted me, thanked me personally in front of the entire staff, and insisted that his mother would want nothing less. Mama Iris, now fully home, held my hands and told me I had given her back her son and her memory both, and that no reward could ever repay a debt like that. Daniel echoed those words, telling me his family's doors would always be open to me, that I belonged with them now, not as an employee, but as family. I resisted at first, telling him I never meant to be a burden, but Mama Iris wouldn't hear a word of it. She insisted I move into their home, and slowly, cautiously, I let myself believe that maybe this was where I was always meant to be. 6 months passed, and in that time, I grew into a role at Whitmore Holdings I never dreamed possible, respected by colleagues who once looked past me entirely. Daniel and I found ourselves spending more and more time together, first over quiet dinners with his mother, then over long conversations that stretched late into the evening. Mama Iris noticed it before either of us said a word aloud. She told her son one afternoon that she had never seen him smile the way he smiled around me, and he finally admitted what his heart had known for weeks, that he had fallen in love with me. He asked me to dinner one evening, more nervous than I had ever seen him, dressed sharply but fidgeting like a man carrying something enormous. I remember teasing him about it as we sat down at a table overlooking the city lights, having no idea what was coming. He took my hand, told me that I had changed the course of his entire life the day I refused to walk past his mother in the rain, and then he knelt down in front of me and asked me to marry him. I said yes before he even finished the question, tears streaming down my face as Mama Iris watched from nearby, whispering a quiet prayer of thanks. Looking back now, I understand that everything started with one small decision on one rainy night. A decision that could have gone unnoticed, that could have cost me nothing to ignore. But kindness has a way of finding its way back to you when you least expect it. And sometimes, the smallest act of compassion is the very thing that leads you home.